And that's what we explained straight away to R360. We want to see all of that detail to know that, right, players, go sign up. We asked a lot of those questions, and not all of the answers have come back.
Like 12s obviously was on the table, then it came off the table, and then it was 10s again, and then how do we innovate union with 9s?
It's focusing on a really important philosophical question around, and I'll try not to get too deep here, but around how sports should be governed and run.
We've reached our word limit. Good night.
Conrad, you've been talking too much. We're out.
Welcome to the Players Podcast, brought to you by International Rugby Players Association, the podcast that delves into issues facing players and the game of rugby. My name's Owen, and I'm alongside the IRPA Chief of Rugby Operations, Conrad Smith, and Head of Women's Rugby at IRPA, Miss Rachael Burford. On the show today, we're looking at new competitions, especially the much talked about R360, and the success of the Women's Rugby World Cup, and where the women's game can go from here. First to Conrad though, we've seen lots of discussion about the proposed R360 tournament in recent weeks, and IRPA obviously put out a statement on that too. So Conrad, can you bring us up to speed on all that's happening here and where this is currently at?
Yeah, happy to do that. It's not the easiest subject, but it's been it's fascinating. It's probably why it's generated a lot of headlines, a lot of talk. It's but they, you know, the R360 group, it's an exciting prospect. I think that's what everyone, you know, can say about it. Initially, that we first sort of met them probably, you know, I'm thinking 12, 18 months ago. You know, and to be fair to them, they came to us as a player association immediately to talk about obviously what they had to offer the game, and that it was, they wanted it to be player centric. They wanted it to put players first. This was all about looking after players. And, you know, in their words, the game was broken, particularly the club game. So their vision was creating a new club competition that would sit alongside the existing international calendar, and how this would work. And, you know, they had all these ideas, a lot of which has been publicised as to how this would work and it would be better for the players. And they wanted us to be involved, and that was a credit to them. And they had some smart people involved in that. And, you know, we've had conversations with them since. And I suppose the challenging piece, and we were open with them from the start, is that we, as International Rugby Players Association, we represent members. So we have player associations all around the world, and then we represent players directly where those player associations don't exist. And all of those players and our members have constructed really, you know, well developed, in the most part, ecosystems as to the protection that they provide to their players. So, you know, in New Zealand, the NZRPA represents the players. They have a collective agreement with the national body, so the New Zealand Rugby. They have a revenue share arrangement. There's all sorts of welfare provisions. They're really well looked after within that ecosystem. And now, you know, we've got this new competition, really exciting, great competition. But for them, for us, or for players to then sign up to that, you really want to have all of that equivalent support and network around them. So not just a big check, that's really important. And players are going to jump at that, but you want to have great welfare provisions. You want to have all the other things that come in with it. And so it's a long process to then, and that's what we explained straight away to R360. Right, we want to see, you know, as big a ask as that is, we want to see all of that detail to know that, right, players, go sign up. There's a big check, and it's also really good. It looks after all of those things. It looks after your welfare. It has all these medical provisions, the same as what you have. And I think, you know, to answer the question how we got to where we were, we asked a lot of those questions, and not all of the answers have come back. And maybe that's because it's a really big ask, but that is our responsibility as player associations to players. You know, we're not taking sides. We haven't said R360, you're the bad guys all of a sudden because you haven't answered all these questions. We've just said in a statement that wasn't meant to go public initially. It was just a statement to R360 where we said, look, we need a lot more information before we are comfortable for players to be signing these contracts. And that's where it is. And we'll, from our point of view, we'll still work with R360. And if they can give us that information, who knows? Maybe we get to a point where we're a lot more comfortable than where we are now. But yeah, that's trying to be brief. Maybe I wasn't, but that was a summary of where we got
guess
to.
that the key point is, though, that R360 is still in the mix here. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered. It's not that we're writing it off. ERPA just want to know more about what's going to go on, what's going to be happening here if this tournament gets off the ground in 2026.
Exactly. And yeah, like I say, we're not taking sides. There's a lot to like about what they're offering. Like we're not saying they are villains, and I know there's different media releases, there's all sorts being said, and the unions who act independently from us, we're not wedded to the unions, and we take our own independent stance where the interest is for the players, and our members who, obviously have their own arrangement with unions, but we're very much just looking at this. It's been a fact-finding mission for us to work out and get as much information as we can, and we'll keep doing that. And who knows, where the future will head, but we haven't written them off or dismissed them at all. It's just a work in progress.
And Rachael, I suppose one of the key things players love to see is innovation, new ideas, things that could shake up the game for the better. And from the women's game, there's a lot of coin on the table that wasn't there or isn't there currently in the women's game.
Yeah, and I think, it's a great opportunity, isn't it? For Conrad talked about if there's a nice check in your back pocket. But going back to the point, it's ensuring that everything else around it is also protected for those players. But, the domestic competition globally in the women's game at the moment isn't the same level as where it is at the men's. So the playing opportunities aren't as great as what they are in the men's established domestic professional competitions. There's 2 fully professional long leagues that currently operate in Elite 1 in France and PWR in England. So players will be seen as this is an interesting opportunity. Will I be looked after financially? Will I be protected around player welfare and support and medical and all those things? And, if those things all come true and they're in the right place, and I could see a lot of players being really interested in the opportunity to go and play in a competition that it is innovative, isn't it? And it's, the ideas around what they're potentially and where they're potentially playing and how it can expand as well. They're initially starting with 4 teams. And, for me, I think that could be a challenge, the player pool for women. We still haven't got a great depth in that area. So what does that do to the rest of the game? And I think a key component to all of this is like, how do we collaborate and work together, including the unions and international rugby players working with R360? Because ultimately, if it turns to be a great product and a great thing for our game and the sport, then we want to be able to work towards making that a really positive thing for players.
Is that possible, though, to bring players' associations, unions, and new innovators, we'll call them that, or 360 together to make this work, though? Or is it always going to be a clash between unions and these type of competitions?
I think, it has. You have to be able to work with them. Like, you can't have a closed shop. Like, going back to it, like, we're trying to grow the game. We have to be open to these ideas, and World Rugby has to be like. And there's actually legal obligations around this too. Like, there's anti-competition laws that you have to follow. So World Rugby, just because a competition starts up and one of their unions complains because all the players are signing over to a different competition, that's not reason enough to then ban that competition. Like, there is every right to start up a competition. If, as we keep saying, if they live up to the regulations around, if they look after players, if they release players for international matches, which World Rugby run, there is there needs to be reasonable grounds for World Rugby to withhold sanctioning a competition. That's the reality. And we've seen in other sports, FIFA have run into legal issues where they've tried to deny a competition, and there was the European courts that said, actually, that's not your place, that you're a governing body running a sport. If there is a competition that independently sets up and it fulfills all your regulations, you can't then deny them that ability. So we've got to be careful, I think, and give these guys a chance. They have every right. We can question them, and that's what I think we're doing. That's our role. We're questioning them around the regulations. We're questioning them about their funding, their financial model, and whether it's sustainable, and whether the checks that they're going to provide players are going to be bankable. And we have a right to ask those questions. But this is a free world. You can set up a competition, and it can survive. So we've just got to follow through those steps. And as we keep saying, that's our place in the game. We're not deciding who's right or wrong here, but we follow a process and see where it ends up.
Doesn't this beg the question then, why is there not a kind of a competitions checklist that whoever comes into the sport, and we know that there's more sevens competitions in the pipeline. If R360 go away, somebody else might come back in a few years. Shouldn't there be a competitions checklist, whether it's ourselves and or World Rugby, that they can put on the table and say, yes, you can run this competition if you check off these boxes and make sure that travel, accommodation, insurance, regulations, financial stability is all part of it.
I agree. I think, and I'd say World Rugby's answer to that is that's their Regulation 16, where they have a sanctioning process and a new competition a cross-border competition will apply through that for sanctioning. And that's what R360 is doing at the moment. I know World Rugby's reviewing their Regulation 16. It's probably not quite fit for purpose at the moment, but that's, I'd say, where World Rugby would answer that question. And we ourselves, and you've queued that up nicely there, Owen, from our perspective, we've been working on, as you say, a checklist so that we can go through, and if it's an R360, if it's a private investment within sevens, if it's another 12s competition that came up a few years back now, we can sort of go through and even work with those competitions. Again, we can't be seen as dismissing them. It could be innovative. It could be the way that rugby needs to go, and it could be in the players' best interest. So we just need a process ourselves where we go through and make sure it's meeting all the regulations, whether it's World Rugby, whether it's providing player representation.
Yeah, I think it's really positive, that there's people out there that are looking at different ways to grow the game. It's not the same people trying to come up with similar ways of playing the game or operating. And I think what the checklist does, it really encourages that engagement. And I think, we've already seen how useful and as a tool it can be, not just for ourselves, but also for these competitions. Like a lot of these people who want to set up a new competition want to do it the best way that they can. And they want to make sure that they're covering off all the right things. And it's a way to really engage. And as Conrad said, the first point of call is working with players, and how they're engaging with us on that has been a real positive thing. And, the best things that these amount to is through that collaboration, through working partnerships. And the more that we've got coming in allows that kind of, I guess, the ideas and the innovation to come alive. So I think it's a positive for the game. And I think we will see, whether it's everything that we've been hearing or whether it's parts of what we've been hearing, and these things always seem to come back around. Like 12s obviously was on the table, then it came off the table, and then it was 10s again, and then there was a thing thrown around about how do we innovate union with 9s, and there's so many different opportunities and options, but you'd like to think that there would be something that's a real positive for players at the end of this.
Do you know, if I can, I think the other part of it is it's focusing on a really important philosophical question around, and I'll try not to get too deep here, but around how sports should be governed and run. Because I think, and this goes back, so a lot of the union feedback around R360 is that they're looking at this competition and quite rightly saying that this type of competition is taking money from the game and not reinvesting it into pathways like unions do. All right. And that is fair, but that's not to say that that should be the way sport should be run. And because I know R360's argument or defence to that would be that in their view, they should run a competition that promotes rugby. It puts rugby as the greatest entertainment showpiece on the globe, and it generates huge money, and that money mostly goes to the players, and it is, and unapologetically, it's kept within that competition. But by promoting rugby, they are indirectly helping the grassroots game because suddenly rugby's a huge sport. And look, like that is very much how sport is run in America. Like, that's oversimplifying it, but the NFL, they run in football. They're not interested in investing in the college and grassroots of football in America. They just send all that money back to their players and their game. So who's to say which is the right way? Like, I don't know, but it's not as if there's a right or wrong here. Like, I don't think it's as simple as saying R360 are the villains, and these are two reasonable approaches as to how they run the game. Polar opposites in how they're doing it, but it's quite a reasonable. And so for that reason, it's just a very interesting discussion. Maybe you won't get to a right answer, but you got to go through the process, and that's where I think we sit as IRPA. We're just representing players, and we work through it and see where it ends up.
Dangerous territory there. Snake says to ignore the community game.
No, but you see that would be, that's the professional game. It's the same, because at the union level, you have this battle with every sport. How do you run the professional elite game and the community game at the same time? Some people say one governing body shouldn't do both. You just have one running the professional game, and as I say, indirectly that helps the community game because it lifts the profile of the sport. You create heroes. The kids want to be like, using the American example again, they want to be LeBron James, they want to be Steph Curry, and that's, they don't need that money coming in from the NBA. The NBA is focused on that professional game, making basketball amazing. And then it's up to the colleges and the other governing bodies at that level to then work it all out. I know this is oversimplifying it, but it is the core of a lot of these issues.
It's a good debate.
It's
a very good debate.
Love a good debate.
Rach, you were threatening to play on until your early 50s, till your body gave up on it. Would this be something you'd be interested in if you were, at any point in your career?
Absolutely.
I mean, are you going to put this question to Conrad as well?
Eventually.
He's a little bit older.
Yeah.
Please answer me. Look, I think I certainly would have shown an interest and wanted a conversation, wanted to understand more about it. It's certainly at kind of later stages of my career, fortunate to have probably achieved a number of things that would give me that kind of itch and the curiosity to go and try something else. I think one of the things I never got the opportunity to do in my career was play overseas, and something that I wish I did do. And this could, potentially have been the thing that provided me with that opportunity. So I would definitely be open to understanding it and taking the opportunities if everything was kind of right.
Given that Man Nanu is still playing, surely you should be able to talk out for this league.
It has crossed my mind. No, I think it's a good, like Rach raises the good point. Like, it probably gets lost on people. Like, this isn't just money. Like, it's a pretty exciting prospect. Like, you talk about women's players, but even to the men's, like the idea of playing a global competition, teams based in Buenos Aires and America and playing over, and like, it's pretty, for some of us that straight away go to the logistics, think, man, how can this work? But if you're just looking at the pure possibilities around it, it is amazing. And I could easily see players jumping at that alone. I suppose for me personally, because I've often asked myself, would I sign up to something like this? mean, man, I was, as an individual, pretty risk averse, so I'd be asking a lot of questions, thinking about, what's this going to mean for if I want to play for the All Blacks and things like that. But I don't know. I wouldn't be the first to sign, put it that way. But I definitely would be one of those that would wait to see what everyone else did first.
Okay, well, the Women's Rugby World Cup is not long finished. A fantastic tournament, a record breaker. Before we get chatting about this with Rachael and Conrad, let's have a look at some of the best action from the tournament.
This was the opening game. Like, what a way to kind of start the entertainment for the Rugby World Cup. Opening, back inside, full length.
I think even as a spectator, that summed up like the quality of tries now. I think I can say this with you, Rach. Like, we've sat on a few panels judging, commenting on the try of the years, but the quality of tries that we're judging the women's games just been amazing. Like, there was that long list that we had, all quality tries, which I don't mind saying in the last few years the quality probably wasn't there. But now it's, all of these are amazing tries, so much teamwork, skills. I think it just shows, why the game was and the whole tournament was as successful as it was.
Yeah, I definitely would agree. Like, I think the level of skill, across the whole team, has really shone. It's not just kind of those individual players and so many players at the line, forwards, backs, linking up, flooding through. And the offload, I mean, Georgia Miller had an absolute worldie of a tournament, didn't she?
Yeah, and it showcased, so many great athletes, and they are all the women's athletes. The players they're great for the game. I think they promoted the whole tournament so well, and teams like Fiji, what a great success. Watching them compete at this tournament as well was brilliant.
I just don't. How do they offload like this? It's ridiculous. Just always on the shoulders. It's just crazy.
You went to Fiji this year, right? You see that they play on the beat. The rugby balls are everywhere. It's part of their life. Honestly, it's because for the men's, you've seen it for years. And
they're also the rugby balls that they're playing with have zero grip on them. So I'm guessing when they get a high quality ball, it's so easy to offload.
Oh yeah, no complaints from Fiji. That ball you would have seen with no grip was probably given to them in the 70s or the 80s.
Yeah,
it gets a lot of use.
I think a lot of the tries that we selected as well had so many components. And I think in the years, it has been down to an individual doing something. But the tries that we've selected this year had so many players across, across the pack, across the back line, all linking up, great team play.
Agreed.
It's been awesome to see.
So, Rach, you were there for a lot of it. You know all about the record-breaking numbers from game one to the final match in Twickenham. What was your overall take on the Women's World Cup this year?
Honestly, there's so many things that I could comment on. I think it was just such an enjoyable Rugby World Cup. It really felt like all the players were having the best time out there. Win or lose, they were celebrating their success of being there. I thought the crowds were unbelievable, the excitement, the buy-in, often cheering for the teams that they're not there to support, but just getting behind the whole atmosphere. And the tagline was this energy never stopped, and it literally didn't. Across the park, wherever you looked, whatever it was, whatever game, activation, fan zone, podcast, it was just so much noise around it. It was incredible. It was so and I was in New Zealand 3 years ago, and I was sitting there going, this is incredible, sold out Eden Park, and I thought, England's got to match up to this, and that they surpassed it, and it was just incredible.
think you were there too.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing that struck me was just how it's a different product, but it's equally as good and maybe better. And you know, you use the word enjoyable, Rach. Like I went to, you know, a couple of the games, took my son to the final. New Zealand went in it, and you'd think, you know, that's going to be a real downer with, you know, passionate Kiwis, but it was just so fun. And even sitting in the crowd, there wasn't like, look, I love the men's game. I played it. I still work around it, but there's a real intensity around games, and particularly a World Cup final, which, you know, I've been lucky enough to play in, but even to watch in the crowd, like which is great but without it, you don't need that, and you can actually enjoy it more. Like I was sitting at Twickenham and I was surrounded by English supporters. They thought I was a Canadian supporter because I cheered for the first try of the game. But there was no resentment, you know, like I guarantee if I was sitting in Twickenham and it was England and they thought I was the, you know, opposition, and I've been there supporting the All Blacks in that situation, and it's, you know, it's quite on the edge, you know, like it's not a nice, comfortable feeling. Like you're still passionate. But with that game, they sort of gave me a bit of stick about cheering. I explained, oh, I'm a Kiwi, I'm a neutral, and it was just good banter for the rest of the game. And I just, yeah, it's just a different product. And I know, you know, Rach, you and I sat in that summit before the final that World Rugby ran, and they talked a lot about women's sport and that you know, the one takeaway for me was just that promoting women's sport, it's not piggybacking on men's sport anymore. And that's definitely the case with rugby. It's its own product, and it will be successful in its own right. And that World Cup was all of that.
Like when you look at the demographic, I think the women's game has kind of been pushed in recent times like it's a family thing. It's like bringing your kids. But when you look around the stadium, like I bumped into two blokes in their late 50s wearing cowboy hats, doing the yee-haw, just there to enjoy it. Like the demographic is, yes, it is family, but it's all people. Like, and I think that I've heard a number of people say this. It just feels like our game is open to everybody.
Agreed.
You don't need to be an expert. You don't need to have known this game inside out. You are welcome to be here, and you have a place here. And you really felt that in whatever game you went to, whatever stadium you were at. There was just such a mixture of people in the crowds just wanting to get behind the game and behind the individuals as well, like really celebrating the athletes who were on the field and what they were producing. It was just, yeah, it was really cool. And because I said to the two guys, I was like, oh, you here supporting Ellie, who's one of the cowgirls in the England team? They're like, no, just jumped on the bandwagon. We're coming to watch a game. Okay. I mean, it was in Brighton, so we expected that kind of party atmosphere down there. But, yeah, it was just cool to see so many different people.
Wouldn't it be great though, Rach, and I mean, you've been around the women's game for so long, to see the quality that we saw, especially in the semi and final, across the board now? Like, I mean, there was still a few blowouts. There was a lot of big scores against, you know, big teams against minnows, etc. We still have a way to go though. It's not fair to say.
Yeah, of course. And I think, you know, whatever World Cup men's or women's you look at, there's always going to be some blowouts. You know, teams are in different kind of levels of investment, different stages of their development. And also this World Cup, we obviously extended from 12 teams to 16 teams. So naturally, there's 4 new teams that are coming into a competition that wouldn't have had the experience or even the game time leading into this. There were more fixtures put on, but that does take time, and it takes greater investment for teams to be able to get to that position. And obviously World Rugby have launched the WXV series, which will provide more opportunity at that high level. But when you still look across, there's so many. There were, before the semi-finals, there was still lots of quality games within the pools, and it shows that there is real potential of these teams to become real contenders. But like any sporting competition, you're going to have teams that have greater investment, greater depth, more experience in these major competitions. And, you know, it's only time that allows that to kind of develop and get better.
You mentioned this Women's Summit that World Rugby ran before the final. Was there a feeling there that there will be more investment in the unions that are, you know, further down the log?
I took the message away that there was a real strong call for it. Like collaboratively, let's find ways in working together to drive that investment, to drive, you know, the numbers that we had here in England. How do we keep hold of that momentum? How do we take that, the learnings from here, and put it into different territories to allow them to have successful programs? But it felt, and Conrad, I'm sure you'll comment, but it definitely felt that there was, come along on this journey with us. Let's do this together, because we all know that the opportunity of growing the women's game grows every part of the game.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think the call for investment's been there. You know, Rach, you talked about New Zealand. Like, I remember being there as well, and from there, I think a number of unions saw the potential, and you also talk. It's just time. Like, these things do take time. Like, you're asking. We're expanding the women's game, but you've got to get girls playing the game, and they are at a younger age, but they've got to come through the system, and they've got to be the next Black Ferns and New Zealand's from a New Zealand perspective, and all of that. You know, that's years away, and I know, like, we see it and we want it to happen now, and we want the next World Cup, but it will. Like, when you look at the growth of the women's game, it's been phenomenal, and to. Sure, we want it to be even faster, but there's also a bit of realism that we have to put in here. And I do think, and your Rachel's point, like, it's just about being innovative. Like, there is, you know, a lot of sports are seeking this investment. And you talk about the men's and women's game. It's across the landscape now, but you got to find ways. I think the most enlightening speakers we had at the summit were, you know, we had a couple brought over from America, and in their football competition over there, women that run in the women's game, and just how they just looked at things in a different way and accessed different revenue streams, just completely, you know, as I said right at the start, didn't look at it as piggybacking off the men's. This was going to be their own competition, built their own stadium, all of these stories just around doing things entirely differently, and that's you know, what I think we'll see happen, and the growth will continue.
That's a key thing, isn't it? The women's game in soccer in the USA, for example, was at a very low point many years ago, and now it's one of the biggest sports stateside.
Yeah, and I think it's City Angels in Kansas City who came over to speak at the summit and just talked about, they put their female lenses on and looked at everything that they were going to do, whether what that was around stadium, in stadium, what the facilities looked like, what the dining looked like, you know, made the experience really female. And this is something, you know, even international rugby players, we've been talking about, we need to start looking at player welfare, calendars, all these things through a women's lens, and not just doing what the men have done. There's so much we take from the men's game, and what does work, what doesn't work, what fits, but making sure that everything we're looking at is fit for purpose. And it might be some things that are similar to the men's, or it could be something completely different. And I think that's an important step forward that we have seen over the last few years, whether that's, you know, within representation and governance, or whether that's on the field and the work around it. We've got to keep our finger on the pulse on that, though, because it can be easy to move away from that and do what's been familiar and what's always seemed to be the way of doing stuff in rugby. We've got to be careful that we don't slip into that ways, or those types of ways again.
And connecting it to the community, like that was one real, and you talk about like takeaways from the summit, was how they had connected their club to their community. And I know I've talked about how the professional game and the community game are almost different, but absolutely, like, the success of sport, and that might be, you know, something that the women's game can do really well, or they have done well when you talk about football in America. Like, they've aligned, like one of the plans, they aligned with celebrities, and they got this, you know, real community feel around their club, and suddenly it was just everyone was in on it, and you were going to the game because that was what people did in that community, and there was ownership models. Everything reflected that this was the community's team. And I think that's, hugely powerful. And those are the sort of ideas that, how sports are going to grow and evolve and think of different ways of doing things. And, they had, what was it, Hollywood actors, or, a whole host of them that bought into the club. But then, the way the world works now, they post this on the Instagram, and I don't know how these things work, as Rachael tell you, but they, and suddenly they're accessing 1 million of their followers, and they're all talking about the football game on the weekend, and suddenly, that's what they all want to go do. And there's just a lot to be said around that, and that rugby I know can do a lot better.
And I think that on one of those points as well is that they really brought the players into the conversation. What is going to be, what's going to help get you guys to support us in what we want trying to do, be part of this legacy, be part of this work. And I think, they give them a revenue share on tickets if they post it on their Instagram and they get a number of clicks through. Like, what a way to incentivize players to get behind something. It's just those kind of small ideas that bringing people together. And I think they've got like 4 Hollywood superstars who are all co-owners, but they're like intense fans as well. They're not just signing a check and part. They are intense fans and bringing people along with them.
Well, the Women's World Cup will be in Australia in 4 years' time, and there'll be a lot happening before then. So we'll make sure to keep you updated on all those things that Earp are involved with in the women's and men's game on the Players Podcast. My thanks to Conrad in New Zealand and Rachael in London. We'll be back next time. Make sure to follow us on socials and on rugbyplayers.org, and we look forward to chatting to you very soon.